up English Unlocked in 2018. And the idea behind English Unlocked is that if you can't speak the other person's language, then the least you can do is unlock your English. And so the service that we provide is that we help people in all sorts of different sectors to modify their communication. That might be spoken communication or it might be written. But the tips that I'm going to share with you today are from the field of clinical research, and that we're going to focus more on written tips. And this plays into your concerns about diversity and widening participation. Now, obviously, people from different ethnic groups can have different biochemistry, and it's important. I'm sure that's one of the reasons that you're even interested in this topic, is that, you know, they need to be represented in studies. And is it fair to say that at the current time they're not represented as much as you would like? That's the feedback I've been getting so far, and I think it's a pressing concern at the moment. So obviously not everybody who is from an ethnically minoritized group has a language deficit. There are many people that speak English with native English speaker fluency, but there are some people within those communities who speak English as a second language, and they're the hardest people to reach. So if you can reach them, if you've adapted your communication to reach those people, then everything else follows. So the tips that I'll share with you today, and there's further support available from me if you would like to take that up. The idea is that if you can make your communication clear enough for somebody who's got an intermediate English level, then it's clear enough for everybody. It's not, you know, I focus on how to help people whose first language isn't English, but also, you know, I'm sure you want to bring in everybody that's not one of the usual suspects, everybody that perhaps isn't educated to degree level, for example. So yeah, I'm going to share with you some insights into things that you can do that will help. So the first thing that I wanted to look at with you is the low-hanging fruit. It's jargon. You know, this is one of the biggest problems for people in your situation, I guess, is that by necessity you have to include certain specialist words because you can't get around them. But, you know, are you just throwing in loads of jargon because you've become blind to that jargon because you're working in that sector for so long that you don't even see it for what it is? Are there ways that you can reduce the jargon? So I have seen examples of patient communication when I've been developing training on this subject. I liaised with an organisation called Egality, and I've also worked with NIHR in my local area. I'm in Newcastle. And I have seen examples, so some of what you'll see today are examples that have been shared with me from real clinical trials. And here's some vocabulary from one of those. Now, bear with me while I share that. So this is all from one example that was shared with me. There were 3 phrases or terms that were used, but 2 of them I'm thinking, really? One of them I think, okay, yeah, you need that. You do need that one in order for your patient group to find you and to know what you're talking about. And I wonder if you could guess which one do you think, okay, it's necessary, and which one's not. Could you type it in the chat? Yeah, I think so too. Alopecia. Even if somebody's got quite a low English level, if they've got alopecia, they're going to know the name of their condition. But a global phase 3 study, I don't know what a global phase 3 study is. I can guess what an investigational medication is, but why have those on the patient information sheet? That I think it was a one-page sheet, and at the bottom it said, I'm just going to look, I don't want to share any identifying information, but it said at the bottom, contact your GP for more information. So this is clearly, I'm guessing it was on a notice board or something like that. They were trying to bring people in, but they were using jargon like this. So hopefully you're looking at this and you're thinking, well, they haven't got a clue. I'm not doing that. I root out all of my jargon. It would never occur to me to include something like that. Now, I don't have a science background. I'm a good person to run your comms past, because I do have a university education, but it's not in the sciences at all. I did sociology for all it was worth. And most of my career, I've taught English as a foreign language. That's what brought me to what I do now. So I know a lot about language and language barriers. And I know, as somebody who speaks 2 languages, I know what it feels like to try to understand another language, but I don't have any scientific background. So I'm, if you want to make something idiot proof, I could be the idiot that you run it past and I won't be offended. Now, something that sometimes happens is that you'll think, okay, I know that I need to cut back on the technical language. I know that I can't just blind them with jargon, they won't understand it. So what I'll do instead is I'll make it nice and conversational. Here's an example of that. So this came at the end of something that they were hoping to attract participants into a study. So it's lovely and conversational and friendly, and the people that have written this have given their names. They're, you know, that's great, isn't it? They've got names. They're not faceless, nameless people. I'm not scared of them. They're approachable, and they're looking forward to hearing from me. But there's a lot of language there that actually, for somebody who's learning English as a foreign language, they don't have a clue what that means. And one of them is phrasal verbs. So, for example, to find out is an example of a phrasal verb. There's more than one phrasal verb in here. And I'm astonished to see Andrew slightly nodding, like he's like, yeah, I know about phrasal verbs. Unless you had like a summer job teaching English, I'll be amazed, because most people haven't got a clue what a phrasal verb is. They don't realize that there are 50,000 of them in the English language, and you're all using them all the time. Most of us are blissfully ignorant of the existence of phrasal verbs, unless you've taught English, as I have done, or you've learned English as a foreign language. So a verb, just to remind you, a verb is a doing word. Find is a doing word. Turn, look, go, they're all verbs. Now, a phrasal verb is something different. A phrasal verb is where you take a verb and you add something, and quite often the thing that you add changes the meaning of the verb. So in the example of find out, find means one thing. I'm trying to find my keys, but to find something out is to learn it or discover it. We use that for information. We don't use it for finding the keys. It's got a different meaning. And in Spanish, it's a completely different verb. Like find is encontrar, and find out is averiguar. They're completely separate words. Because in Spanish, they don't have phrasal verbs. In fact, the only languages that have phrasal verbs are Germanic ones. So your reader may notice a phrasal verb that you've used, and they'll see, for example, find, and then they'll think, right, I know what find means, but they won't notice that little preposition that comes next. Here are some more examples. So, for example, run means one thing, but to run out of, well, that means something completely different. And somebody that's coming to English from another language might know run and might think, oh, yeah, run. And then they don't notice out of, and they're completely mystified when you say we've run out of pens. So now that you know what a phrasal verb is, can you spot 3 phrasal verbs? Well, I've given you one of them. Find out. So find is a verb, but for it to be a phrasal verb, it needs to have 1 or 2 prepositions after it. And it might be that those prepositions change the meaning of the verb. So can you spot 2 other phrasal verbs in this example? Yeah, to fill you in. Excellent. Email us isn't a phrasal verb. But yeah, look forward to is a phrasal verb. So to fill is one thing, but to fill someone in is completely different. And similarly, look is a verb, but look forward to means something completely different, as does look after, which in Spanish is cuidar, and look up to, admirar, look for, buscar. Other languages have like a whole range of verbs that they use instead. So this is only one of many things that are tricky about the English language. Phrasal verbs are tricky, but if I was to deliver some training on this to you, I would be blowing your minds with all sorts of other things about English that just make it harder than it needs to be. And it's a great idea if you can get somebody like me to look at your comms through those eyes and tidy it up and simplify it. So yeah, looking at this, we've got 3 examples of a phrasal verb. There in blue. And then in green, that's an idiom. They're different, but they're just as confusing. Now, would you like to suggest in the chat any alternatives to find out or fill you in? And then I'll show you my suggestions. Yeah, those are great suggestions. They're unambiguous. So here's my suggestion. So phrasal verbs are fine for a native English speaking audience, but not for an audience of people who've learned English as a foreign language. However, there are lots of the tips that I share which would help both kinds of readership and will help you to simplify and clarify what you're saying for all sorts of different readers. So I'm going to share a tip with you now. Here's an example. So this sentence is too long. Something that you can do that really helps all readers, not just ones that have learned English as a foreign language, is to think about how long your sentences are and how can you make them shorter. So this example comes from, is included in an ebook that I've written. And if you would like to read my ebook, it's free. There'll be the opportunity to connect with me later by sharing your email address. And I'll be happy to send you my ebook on how to write simpler communications. Whereas this comes from some training that I provide on how to write clearer comms for that readership. So this sentence is too long. There are a couple of things that you could do to make it less long. You can reduce, you can take out extra words, or you can chop it up. So this one, I would suggest chopping it up. Like 2 short sentences are always going to be better than 1 long sentence. In this case, you've got 2 clauses in this sentence, and they're connected with the word who. So this is what I would suggest, and yeah, I would love to help you. You know, I said earlier about idioms, and I gave the example of, let me see, there's an idiom here, to give us a call or give someone a ring. That's an example of an idiom. You can't translate them literally, they don't make sense. And here's another idiom. I wonder if you can guess which idiom this is. An idiom is like an expression, a colloquialism. Type it in the chat if you can work out what that woman's doing for me. Yeah, she's picking my brains. Exactly. So yeah, that's an example of something not to say. And I have a free drop-in called the Pick My Brains drop-in, which is every Wednesday. And that, when I mentioned earlier that if you've got something very small for me to look at and just run it past me, then I'd be happy to look at it in the Pick My Brains drop-in.